The infrared signature appeared on radar screens across 3 military bases simultaneously at 3:47 hours, moving at impossible speeds through restricted airspace above the Nevada test range. What should have been a routine night became the most classified incident in modern aviation history. The object defied every known aircraft profile in the Pentagon's database, yet its flight path suggested intimate knowledge of American defense corridors. Colonel Marcus Viper Hendricks gripped his coffee mug tighter as the blip danced across his screen at Nellis Air Force Base. 23 years of service had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being screamed danger. The bogey wasn't following any known flight pattern. It was hunting, probing, testing their response times with surgical precision. "Scramble the Raptors," he barked into his headset, watching as 2 F-22 stealth fighters lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness. Their call signs, Ghost 1 and Ghost 2, seemed appropriate as they vanished into the night sky, their engines barely whispers against the desert wind. Captain Jake Thunderbolt Morrison took point in Ghost 1, his hands steady on the controls as he climbed to intercept altitude. His wingman, Lieutenant Colonel Elena Phoenix Vasquez, flanked him in Ghost 2, her dark eyes scanning the horizon through her helmet's heads-up display. Elena had earned her call sign the hard way, rising from the ashes of a career that military politics had tried to destroy 3 times over. Nelly's control, Ghost 1. "We're at Angels 20, no visual contact with bogey." Morrison's voice crackled through the radio, professional but tense. The mystery aircraft had vanished from primary radar, yet secondary sensors still detected something moving out there in the darkness. Elena's fingers danced across her instrument panel, adjusting sensors that most pilots couldn't even pronounce. Her background in electronic warfare made her the squadron's unofficial specialist in identifying foreign aircraft signatures. But this contact wasn't behaving like anything in her extensive database of Russian, Chinese, or European military aircraft. Ghost 2 to Nelly's control. Her voice carried the calm authority that had made her enemies in the Pentagon and allies in the cockpit. "Requesting permission to go active radar. Something's not right about this profile." The silence that followed lasted exactly 7 seconds, long enough for both pilots to understand they were dealing with something unprecedented. When Colonel Hendricks finally responded, his voice carried a weight that spoke of conversations happening far above their clearance level. "Ghost Flight, you are cleared to investigate. Weapons hot. Rules of engagement are flexible." Elena felt her pulse quicken as she armed her AIM-120 missiles. In her 8 years flying the F-22, she'd never been given such ambiguous orders. The desert spread below them like a moonlit ocean, and somewhere in that vast darkness, something was waiting for them to make the first move. The hunt was about to begin. The F-22's radar painted empty sky, but Elena's years of combat experience had taught her to trust more than just technology. She banked slightly left, following an instinct that had kept her alive through 2 tours in hostile airspace. The mystery aircraft was playing games with them, using the terrain and atmospheric conditions to mask its presence. "Ghost 1, I'm picking up electromagnetic anomalies at 270 degrees. Elena's voice remained steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Whatever's out there, it's actively jamming our frequencies." Morrison acknowledged with a grunt, adjusting his course to parallel hers. Their F-22s cut through the night air like technological predators, every system primed for combat. The Raptors' stealth capabilities made them nearly invisible to most radar systems, but Elena suspected their quarry possessed technology that rendered such advantages meaningless. The first visual contact came at 3:52 hours, a brief glint of metal catching starlight 12 miles ahead. Elena's breath caught as she processed what her eyes were telling her. The aircraft's configuration didn't match any known design. It was too angular for a civilian craft, too large for a fighter, yet moved with an agility that defied conventional aerodynamics. Ghost 2, confirm visual contact. Morrison's voice carried new urgency. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Affirmative, Ghost 1. Unknown aircraft, bearing 090, altitude approximately 18,000 feet. Alina's training took over as she began broadcasting on international emergency frequencies. Unknown aircraft, you are in restricted military airspace. Identify yourself immediately and alter course to heading 180. The response was immediate and unexpected. Instead of radio communication, the mystery aircraft's navigation lights began flashing in a complex pattern. Alina's heart rate spiked as she recognized the sequence. It was Morse code, but not in English. The pattern repeated 3 times before stopping abruptly. Ghost Flight, Nellie's control. We're monitoring your transmission. The bogey is not responding to standard international protocols. You are authorized to close distance for visual identification. Alina pushed her throttles forward, feeling the Raptor surge ahead with barely contained power. The F-22s' twin engines roared with controlled violence, propelling her toward an encounter that would redefine everything she thought she knew about air superiority. The mystery aircraft made no attempt to evade, maintaining its heading as if inviting closer inspection. As the distance closed, Alina began to make out details that sent chills down her spine. The aircraft's skin appeared to shift and shimmer in ways that suggested active camouflage technology decades ahead of anything in the American arsenal. More disturbing was its complete lack of conventional control surfaces, no visible ailerons, rudders, or elevators that might explain its impossible maneuvers. Nellie's control, Ghost 2. This isn't matching any aircraft in our threat assessment database. Recommend we contact NORAD and get some answers about what's supposed to be flying in our airspace tonight. The pause that followed told Alina everything she needed to know. Someone, somewhere, knew exactly what they were dealing with, and that someone had chosen not to share that information with the pilots sent to intercept it. The distance between hunter and hunted continued to shrink, and Alina prepared herself for whatever revelation awaited in the desert sky. Her finger hovered over the weapon's release, knowing that the next few minutes would either end in triumph or catastrophe. The mystery aircraft showed no signs of hostile intent, but in Alina's experience, that could change in an instant. At 5 miles separation, the unknown aircraft suddenly banked hard right, revealing a profile that made Alina's blood run cold. She was looking at technology that shouldn't exist, piloted by someone who clearly understood American military procedures better than most American pilots. The aircraft's sudden maneuver revealed something that changed everything. Alina's enhanced vision systems caught a glimpse of markings on the craft's underside, not the angular scripts of foreign nations, but faded remnants of what appeared to be U.S. military designations. The discovery hit her like a physical blow, reframing the entire encounter in ways that made her question everything about this mission. Ghost 1, are you getting this? Alina's voice carried a new tension as she adjusted her sensors for maximum resolution. I'm seeing what looks like American military markings on the bogey's ventral surface. Morrison's F-22 closed distance, his own targeting system struggling to maintain a lock on the elusive craft. Negative, Ghost 2. My instruments are being jammed harder than a rush-hour radio station. Whatever this thing is packing for electronic countermeasures, it's making my Raptor look like a museum piece. The mystery aircraft seemed to sense their growing confusion and began executing maneuvers that violated every principle of aerodynamics Alina had learned in flight school. It climbed vertically at angles that should have stalled any conventional aircraft, then transitioned into a horizontal flight pattern without losing airspeed. The G-forces alone should have killed any human pilot. Nellie's control, Ghost Flight. We need immediate clarification on whether any experimental aircraft are scheduled for testing in this sector. Alina's voice carried the authority of someone who had learned not to trust official briefings. This bogey is demonstrating capabilities that suggest either foreign technological superiority or domestic black project origins. Colonel Hendrick's response came after a pause that lasted exactly 18 seconds, long enough for Alina to know that conversations were happening on secure channels far above her clearance level. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the careful neutrality of someone reading from a prepared script. Ghost flight, maintain visual contact, but do not repeat. Do not attempt weapons lock or hostile maneuvers. Treat this as a reconnaissance mission only. Alina felt her jaw clench at the implications. Someone had sent them up against unknown technology with instructions that essentially neutered their ability to defend themselves. The mystery aircraft continued its impossible dance through the night sky, leading them deeper into restricted airspace that few pilots were authorized to enter. The craft's flight path was taking them toward the most classified sections of the Nevada test range, areas where even F-22 pilots weren't welcome without specific authorization. Alina began to understand that this wasn't a random incursion. It was a carefully orchestrated test, and she and Morrison were unwilling participants in someone else's experiment. Ghost 2 to Ghost 1, Alina transmitted on a secure frequency that bypassed ground control. I'm getting the feeling we're not hunting this thing, it's evaluating us. Morrison's response was immediate and grim. Copy that, Phoenix. Question is, what happens when it finishes its evaluation? The answer came sooner than either pilot expected. The mystery aircraft suddenly decelerated to subsonic speeds, allowing the F-22s to close within visual range. What Alina saw through her canopy made her question everything she thought she knew about American military technology and the people authorized to fly it. The cockpit was clearly visible now, and inside sat a figure in what appeared to be a flight suit that predated modern military uniforms by decades. The pilot in the mystery aircraft turned to look directly at Alina's F-22, and even across the distance separating them, she could see enough detail to know she was looking at another woman. The recognition hit both pilots simultaneously. Whatever this encounter was about, it had been engineered specifically for Alina to witness. Ghost 1, Ghost 2, this is Nellie's control with updated instructions. Colonel Hendrick's voice cut through their radio channel with unusual formality. You are directed to escort the bogey to landing zone Bravo 7. Do not engage, do not question, do not deviate from this order. Alina felt ice form in her stomach. Landing zone Bravo 7 was located deep within Area 51, in sections so classified that even her security clearance wouldn't get her past the first checkpoint. Whoever was flying that impossible aircraft had pulled that reached the highest levels of military command. The mystery pilot seemed to understand the new instructions without hearing them, banking toward the designated landing zone with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with Nevada's restricted airspace. Alina followed, her mind racing through implications that grew more disturbing with each passing mile. As they approached the landing zone, Alina caught sight of ground crews already in position, their movements suggesting they had been expecting this arrival. Heavy equipment was staged around a runway that didn't appear on any official maps, and personnel wearing uniforms she didn't recognize moved with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed operation. Ghost Flight, you are ordered to maintain altitude and provide overwatch only. Hendrick's voice carried a finality that ended any possibility of questions. Do not attempt to land or make radio contact with ground units. Alina watched through her canopy as the mystery aircraft executed a perfect landing approach, its impossible aerodynamics translating into conventional flight characteristics only when necessary. The craft touched down with the grace of a pilot who had performed this maneuver countless times before. Ground crews swarmed the aircraft the moment it rolled to a stop, their movements coordinated by someone clearly familiar with its unique requirements. Alina strained to see through her targeting systems as the cockpit opened, revealing the pilot who had led them on this surreal chase through the Nevada desert. The figure that emerged from the cockpit moved with the unmistakable bearing of a military aviator, but something about her uniform and equipment suggested she belonged to a program that existed outside normal chain of command. Alina's enhanced vision caught details that made her pulse quicken, patches and insignia that referenced units she had never heard of, despite her extensive knowledge of military aviation communities. "Phoenix, you seeing what I'm seeing down there?" Morrison's voice carried the tension of a pilot who had stumbled into something far beyond his security clearance. Alina keyed her mic but found herself at a loss for words. The woman on the ground looked up at their circling F-22s and raised her hand in what could have been either a greeting or a farewell. The gesture carried implications that Alina was only beginning to understand. The mystery pilot disappeared into a hangar that seemed to materialize from the desert floor, leaving Alina and Morrison to contemplate what they had just witnessed. Their role in this encounter was clearly finished, but the questions it raised would haunt Alina for years to come. The flight back to Nellis Air Force Base passed in relative silence, both pilots processing an encounter that defied every briefing they had ever received about threats to American airspace. Alina's mind kept returning to the moment when the mystery pilot had looked directly at her F-22, as if the entire encounter had been arranged for her specific benefit. Colonel Hendricks was waiting for them in the debriefing room, his expression carrying the weight of someone who had been given unpleasant instructions from higher authority. Alina recognized the look. She had seen it on the faces of superior officers who were about to deliver news that would complicate her career in ways she wouldn't understand until much later. "What you witnessed tonight is classified at levels that require you to sign documentation that will affect your military service permanently," Hendricks began without preamble. "You will not discuss this encounter with anyone, including your spouses, your squadron mates, or your chaplains. Any violation of this order will result in immediate court-martial and possible treason charges." Alina felt her jaw clench as she processed the implications. She had spent her entire career fighting for recognition in a system that preferred to keep accomplished female pilots in support roles. And now, she was being told to remain silent about an encounter that raised questions about the very nature of American military technology. "Sir, with respect, we need to understand what we encountered out there." Alina's voice carried the careful authority of someone who had learned to challenge orders without appearing insubordinate. That aircraft demonstrated capabilities that suggest either massive technological breakthroughs or potential security compromises that threaten national defense. Hendricks' expression never changed as he slid 2 folders across the briefing table. "Sign the documents, Captain Vasquez. Your questions will be answered on a need-to-know basis, and right now, you don't need to know anything beyond your obligation to remain silent." Alina opened her folder and began reading language that essentially signed away her right to discuss the encounter for the remainder of her natural life. The penalties for violation were severe enough to end not just her military career, but her freedom. Morrison signed his documents without reading them, but Alina took her time, understanding that this decision would define the rest of her service. As she signed her name, Alina made a mental note to remember every detail of what she had witnessed. Someone had gone to enormous effort to orchestrate this encounter, and she was determined to understand why she had been chosen to witness it. The debriefing concluded with instructions that they would return to normal flight operations immediately, and that their encounter with the mystery aircraft would be recorded in classified files that neither pilot would ever see again. Alina left the room with more questions than answers, but also with a growing suspicion that her role in this story was far from finished. That night, Alina lay in her quarters staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the encounter in her mind. The mystery pilot's gesture haunted her. There had been something familiar about the woman's bearing, something that suggested a connection Alina couldn't yet identify. She closed her eyes and tried to recall every detail of the aircraft's configuration, every nuance of its impossible maneuvers, every marking she had glimpsed on its unusual hull. Somewhere in those memories lay clues to questions that someone desperately wanted to remain unasked. 3 days passed before Alina received orders that confirmed her suspicions about the encounter's lasting implications. She was being transferred to a new assignment that would take her away from frontline operations and into a world of classified programs that existed in the shadows of the military-industrial complex. Her new posting was to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where she would be working with a unit that didn't appear in any official organizational charts. The orders were signed by officers she had never heard of, with authorities that seemed to transcend normal military hierarchy. Alina packed her belongings with the growing understanding that her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been the beginning, not the end, of her involvement in whatever program had produced that impossible technology. The drive to Ohio gave Alina time to think about the trajectory of her career and the forces that seemed determined to control it. She had always believed that excellence in the cockpit would be enough to overcome the institutional biases that limited female pilots' advancement. But recent events suggested that merit alone was insufficient when dealing with programs that operated outside normal military structure. Wright-Patterson greeted her with the kind of bureaucratic opacity that characterized installations dealing with classified technology. Her sponsors processed her through security checks that delved deeper into her background than any previous clearance investigation, asking questions about family members, financial obligations, and personal relationships that seemed designed to identify potential leverage points. Colonel Rebecca Hawk Morrison, no relation to her former wingman, was waiting in Alina's new office with the kind of smile that suggested professional respect tempered by institutional caution. Hawk had earned her reputation managing programs that didn't officially exist, and her presence indicated that Alina's new assignment involved technology that pushed the boundaries of current military capabilities. "Welcome to Project Looking Glass, Captain Vasquez." Hawk's greeting carried implications that Alina was only beginning to understand. "Your encounter in Nevada identified you as someone with the technical background and psychological profile we need for our next phase of operations." Alina felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to connect as Hawk outlined the broad parameters of her new assignment. Project Looking Glass was tasked with evaluating foreign technology that had been acquired through channels that couldn't be discussed in detail, and Alina's background in electronic warfare made her uniquely qualified to understand systems that operated outside conventional design parameters. The mystery aircraft from Nevada had been just one example of technology that challenged fundamental assumptions about aerodynamics and power systems. Alina's job would be to help reverse engineer capabilities that could provide American forces with decisive advantages in future conflicts, assuming they could understand how the systems worked well enough to reproduce them. Over the following weeks, Alina was introduced to aircraft that made her Nevada encounter seem mundane by comparison. Hangars at Wright-Patterson housed flying machines that defied classification, their origins shrouded in documentation that referenced programs spanning decades of secret development. Some bore faded American military markings, while others carried insignia that Alina didn't recognize. Alina's technical background allowed her to understand propulsion systems that operated without visible engine components, navigation equipment that seemed to respond to pilot intentions rather than control inputs, and communication systems that functioned on frequencies that shouldn't exist. Each discovery raised new questions about the true state of aerospace technology and the organizations that controlled its development. Her colleagues in Project Looking Glass represented the cream of American military aviation, pilots and engineers who had been selected for their ability to think beyond conventional limitations, while maintaining the operational security necessary for work at the highest classification levels. Alina found herself working alongside officers whose careers had followed paths similar to her own, talented individuals who had been quietly reassigned to programs that didn't officially exist. The work was intellectually challenging in ways that frontline operations never approached, but Alina couldn't shake the feeling that she was being prepared for something more significant than technology evaluation. The aircraft she studied seemed to be arranged in a progression that suggested someone was gradually introducing her to capabilities that would culminate in an assignment she couldn't yet imagine. Colonel Morrison seemed to sense Alina's growing questions about the program's ultimate objectives, and their conversations began to hint at operational requirements that extended beyond technology assessment. Project Looking Glass wasn't just studying foreign aircraft. It was preparing American pilots to fly them in missions that hadn't been authorized by anyone Alina recognized. 6 months into her assignment at Wright-Patterson, Alina received orders that confirmed her suspicions about the program's true nature. She was being transferred again, this time to a facility that didn't appear on any map she could access. Her new assignment would require her to relocate to accommodations that provided no forwarding address and no communication with the outside world beyond carefully monitored channels. The facility turned out to be located in the Colorado Rockies, built into mountainsides that concealed hangars large enough to house aircraft that dwarfed anything Alina had seen at Wright-Patterson. Her new colleagues were pilots who had followed career paths that paralleled her own, accomplished aviators who had been quietly removed from conventional assignments and brought into programs that operated with authorities she was only beginning to understand. Alina's new commander was a woman whose personnel file was so heavily redacted that even her name appeared to be classified. She went by the call sign Spectre, and her bearing suggested combat experience in conflicts that hadn't been acknowledged by any government. Spectre's briefings hinted at operational requirements that would test Alina's skills in ways that conventional military aviation never approached. The aircraft housed in the Colorado facility represented technologies that seemed to advance by decades with each new design Alina encountered. Some were clearly of foreign origin, their configurations suggesting design philosophies that originated outside American aerospace communities. Others appeared to be domestic products of programs that had been operating in secret for periods that exceeded Alina's entire military career. Alina's training began with aircraft that required her to unlearn fundamental principles of flight that had governed her entire aviation career. Control inputs that should have produced specific responses instead triggered reactions that seemed to anticipate pilot intentions before they were fully formed. Navigation systems responded to thought patterns rather than manual commands, and weapons systems demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything in the acknowledged American arsenal. The psychological demands of flying such advanced aircraft proved as challenging as the technical requirements. Alina found herself questioning basic assumptions about the relationship between pilot and machine, as well as the nature of technology that seemed to blur the boundaries between human intention and mechanical response. Some of her colleagues described flying experiences that bordered on telepathic communication with aircraft systems. As Alina's skills with exotic aircraft developed, Spectre began briefing her on operational scenarios that suggested real-world applications for her training. The missions described involved infiltration of foreign airspace using technologies that would render Alina invisible to any known detection systems, reconnaissance operations that required her to gather intelligence without leaving any trace of American involvement. More disturbing were hints about missions that might require Alina to make contact with personnel operating similar aircraft under foreign flags. The briefings suggested that American forces weren't the only ones operating technology that officially didn't exist, and that Alina might find herself in situations where distinguishing friend from enemy required knowledge that transcended traditional military identification procedures. Alina's training culminated in a series of test flights that took her over terrain she didn't recognize, using aircraft that performed maneuvers which should have been impossible according to conventional understanding of physics. Her companions on these missions were pilots whose background suggested they had been selected for psychological profiles that enabled them to function effectively while operating technology that challenged basic assumptions about reality. The final test flight took Alina over desert terrain that looked familiar, though she couldn't immediately place where she had seen it before. Her aircraft performed flawlessly, responding to her intentions with an intimacy that made conventional control systems seem primitive by comparison. As she completed her assigned route, Alina began to recognize landmarks that triggered memories of her encounter with the mystery aircraft that had started her journey into this shadowy world. She was flying over the Nevada test range, retracing the path she had followed in her F-22 during that early morning encounter that now seemed like a lifetime ago. The realization struck her with the force of revelation. She was flying the same type of aircraft that had led her on that surreal chase through restricted airspace, and she was beginning to understand her role in a story that was far more complex than she had imagined. Alina's radio crackled with instructions to proceed to a landing zone that she recognized as the same facility where she had watched the mystery pilot disappear months earlier. As she approached the runway, she could see ground crews preparing for her arrival with the same efficiency she had observed from her F-22 cockpit during that life-changing encounter. The landing was smooth in ways that conventional aircraft couldn't achieve, the exotic propulsion system allowing her to touch down with barely perceptible impact. As Alina shut down systems that she was only beginning to understand, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from conventional military aviation into a world where technology and capability existed far beyond anything acknowledged by official sources. Ground crews approached her aircraft with the practiced efficiency of personnel who had been servicing such exotic machines for years. Alina remained in her cockpit for a moment longer, savoring the sensation of flying technology that made her previous career seem quaint by comparison. When she finally opened her canopy, she was greeted by a figure whose presence confirmed suspicions she had been developing about the true nature of her assignment. Colonel Hendricks stood beside her aircraft, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone whose careful planning had produced desired results. Alina understood that her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been no accident. It had been a carefully orchestrated recruitment process designed to identify pilots with the technical skills and psychological flexibility necessary for operations that transcended conventional military structure. "Welcome to the real Air Force, Captain Vasquez." Hendricks' greeting carried implications that Alina was only beginning to comprehend. "Your performance in training suggests you're ready for operational assignments that will test everything you think you know about aerial combat and national defense." Alina climbed down from her aircraft with the growing understanding that her career had reached a turning point that would define not just her professional future, but her relationship with technology and capabilities that existed in the shadows of acknowledged military power. The exotic aircraft behind her represented just one example of capabilities that American forces could deploy when conventional approaches proved insufficient for mission requirements. Over the following days, Alina was briefed on operational scenarios that revealed the true scope of programs that had been operating in secret for decades. American forces possessed technologies that could penetrate any defense system currently deployed by potential adversaries, gather intelligence from sources that remained completely unaware of surveillance, and project power in ways that left no forensic evidence of American involvement. The pilots selected for these operations represented a community within the military that operated according to rules and authorities that transcended traditional chain of command structures. Alina found herself among aviators whose careers had been carefully managed to prepare them for missions that couldn't be acknowledged by any government, using capabilities that officially didn't exist. Her first operational assignment took Alina over foreign territory, using aircraft that rendered her invisible to every detection system that could conceivably threaten American interests. The mission's objectives were narrowly defined but strategically significant. She was to gather intelligence about foreign military capabilities, while ensuring that her presence remained completely undetected by any observer. The flight took her deep into airspace that conventional aircraft couldn't penetrate without triggering international incidents, using technology that allowed her to observe military installations with resolution that exceeded satellite reconnaissance capabilities. Alina's aircraft responded to her intentions with an intimacy that made the mission feel more like telepathic reconnaissance than conventional aerial surveillance. As she completed her assigned objectives and returned to base, Alina began to understand that her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been just the beginning of her introduction to capabilities that existed far beyond the acknowledged boundaries of American military technology. Her role in this shadowy world was expanding in ways that would test not just her skills as a pilot, but her understanding of the relationship between technology, national security, and the nature of power itself. The debriefing that followed her first operational mission revealed the true scope of intelligence requirements that justified maintaining such exotic capabilities in secret. Alina's reconnaissance had provided information about foreign military developments that could influence American strategic planning for decades, all gathered without leaving any evidence that American forces had been involved in collecting it. Colonel Hendricks seemed satisfied with Alina's performance, but his briefing hinted at future assignments that would require her to operate in scenarios far more complex than simple reconnaissance. The technology she had mastered opened possibilities for operations that could influence international events without any nation being able to prove American involvement, a capability that provided unprecedented flexibility for protecting American interests in an increasingly complex global environment. Alina left the debriefing with the understanding that her career had entered a phase that would be defined by missions that couldn't be acknowledged and capabilities that officially didn't exist. She had become part of a community of aviators who operated at the intersection of technology and national power, using aircraft that represented the cutting edge of human aerospace achievement. As she prepared for future assignments, Alina reflected on the path that had brought her from conventional military aviation into a world where the boundaries between possible and impossible seemed to shift with each new technological breakthrough. The mystery aircraft that had started her journey had been just one example of capabilities that American forces could deploy when conventional approaches proved insufficient. The night sky above the Colorado facility sparkled with stars that seemed closer than ever before, as if her experiences with exotic aircraft had somehow altered her perspective on the relationship between Earth and space. Alina understood that her role in this story was still evolving, and that future chapters would test her abilities in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Her quarters in the mountain facility provided her with time to process experiences that challenged everything she had believed about the limits of human technology and the nature of military power. Alina had become part of something larger than conventional military service, a community of individuals who operated at the very edge of what was possible in terms of aerospace technology and national security. The training schedule for the following day included flights that would take her even further beyond the boundaries of conventional aviation, using aircraft that represented advances in technology that wouldn't be acknowledged by official sources for decades. Alina prepared for sleep knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges to her understanding of what was possible when human ingenuity was combined with resources that transcended normal budgetary limitations. Her dreams that night were filled with images of aircraft that moved through the sky with impossible grace, piloted by aviators who had been selected for their ability to function effectively at the intersection of technology and national power. Alina was becoming part of a story that extended far beyond her individual experiences, a narrative about the relationship between human capability and technological advancement that would influence the course of international relations for generations to come. Morning brought new briefings that revealed the next phase of Alina's integration into operations that existed at the very edge of acknowledged military capability. Her performance in training had qualified her for assignments that would require her to work with international partners whose existence couldn't be officially recognized by any government, using technologies that represented collaborative development efforts between nations that maintained public facades of competition and distrust. The aircraft assigned for her next training cycle represented collaboration between American aerospace engineers and their counterparts in allied nations, resulting in capabilities that exceeded what any single country could develop independently. Alina would be learning to operate systems that embodied the cutting edge of international technological cooperation, designed for missions that required capabilities no individual nation possessed. Her training partners for these advanced systems included pilots whose national origins were deliberately obscured, aviators who had been selected for their technical skills rather than their political affiliations. Alina found herself working with individuals whose expertise complemented her own, creating teams capable of operating aircraft that required coordination between multiple specialists to achieve full capability. The missions briefed for these international teams involved scenarios that could influence global stability in ways that transcended traditional concepts of national interest. Alina was learning to think about aerospace operations in terms of planetary security rather than national defense, preparing for assignments that would require her to consider the welfare of human civilization rather than just American strategic objectives. As her training progressed, Alina began to understand that her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been part of a recruitment process that extended far beyond American military programs. She was being prepared for operations that involved international cooperation at levels that couldn't be acknowledged by any government, using technologies that represented the combined efforts of human aerospace engineers working toward objectives that transcended national boundaries. The scope of these collaborative programs became clear during briefings that revealed the true nature of threats that justified maintaining such exotic capabilities in secret. Alina learned about challenges to planetary security that required responses coordinated between nations that maintained public facades of competition and distrust, using technologies that represented the pinnacle of human aerospace achievement. Her role in these international programs was expanding in ways that would test not just her skills as a pilot, but her ability to function effectively as part of teams whose members came from cultures and military traditions that differed significantly from her American background. Alina was learning to operate in an environment where technical competence mattered more than political affiliation, and where mission success required coordination between individuals whose governments might be in conflict on other issues. The aircraft she was learning to operate represented technological achievements that would influence the course of human aerospace development for decades, designed by international teams working toward objectives that transcended traditional concepts of national security. Alina was becoming part of a story about human cooperation that existed in the shadows of public international relations, using capabilities that officially didn't exist to address challenges that threatened the stability of human civilization itself. Her training reached its culmination in a mission that would test everything she had learned about operating advanced aircraft in coordination with international partners. Alina would be flying over terrain that crossed multiple national boundaries, using technology that rendered traditional concepts of sovereignty irrelevant, gathering intelligence about threats that could affect global stability regardless of political boundaries. The mission briefing revealed objectives that were simultaneously more complex and more straightforward than anything Alina had encountered in conventional military service. She would be working to identify and assess challenges to planetary security that required responses coordinated between nations that maintained public facades of competition, using aircraft that represented the combined technological achievements of human aerospace engineering. As Alina prepared for her final qualification mission, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from conventional military aviation into a world where the boundaries between national interest and planetary security seemed to merge. Her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been just the beginning of her introduction to capabilities that existed at the very edge of human technological achievement. The pre-flight preparation involved coordination with team members whose expertise complemented her own, creating operational capability that exceeded what any individual pilot could achieve independently. Alina was learning to function as part of international teams whose effectiveness depended on trust and competence rather than shared political affiliations, preparing for missions that would require her to consider the welfare of human civilization rather than just American strategic objectives. Her aircraft for the qualification mission represented technology that embodied decades of collaborative development between allied nations, resulting in capabilities that transcended what any single country could achieve independently. Alina would be testing not just her own skills, but the effectiveness of international cooperation in addressing challenges that threatened global stability. As she strapped into her cockpit, Alina understood that her performance on this mission would determine whether she would be accepted into operational programs that existed at the very pinnacle of human aerospace achievement. The aircraft around her responded to her presence with familiar intimacy, systems that had been designed to interface with pilot intentions in ways that made conventional control methods seem primitive. The mission profile took Alina and her international team over territory that spanned multiple continents, using aircraft that could penetrate any defense system currently deployed by any nation, gathering intelligence about challenges that transcended traditional concepts of national security. Alina found herself operating in an environment where her American military background was just one component of capabilities that required international cooperation to achieve full effectiveness. The flight itself revealed the true nature of threats that justified maintaining such exotic capabilities in secret. Alina's sensors detected activities that could influence global stability in ways that no single nation could address independently, confirming the need for international cooperation at levels that couldn't be acknowledged by any government. As the mission progressed, Alina began to understand that her role in these programs extended far beyond her individual capabilities as a pilot. She was becoming part of an international community of aviators who operated at the intersection of technology and global security, using aircraft that represented the pinnacle of human aerospace achievement to address challenges that threatened the stability of human civilization itself. The successful completion of her qualification mission confirmed Alina's acceptance into operational programs that would define the remainder of her career in ways she was only beginning to understand. Her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been the first step in a journey that would take her to the very edge of human technological capability, working with international partners to address challenges that transcended traditional concepts of national security. Colonel Hendricks was waiting for Alina when she returned from her qualification mission, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone whose careful planning had produced desired results. Alina understood that her journey from conventional military aviation into the world of exotic aircraft and international cooperation had reached a milestone that would influence the course of her career for decades to come. "Congratulations, Captain Vasquez." Hendricks' greeting carried implications about future assignments that would test everything she had learned about the intersection of technology and international security. "Your performance qualifies you for operational programs that represent the pinnacle of collaborative aerospace achievement." Alina felt the weight of her new responsibilities settling around her like an invisible uniform, understanding that her career had reached a point where individual accomplishment would be measured by contributions to objectives that transcended national boundaries. The aircraft she had mastered represented just the beginning of capabilities that would be available for missions requiring the combined technological achievements of allied nations. Her new assignment took Alina to facilities that existed in locations so classified that even their general geographic regions remained secret from most government officials. The operations conducted from these bases involved aircraft that pushed the boundaries of human aerospace technology, piloted by international teams whose effectiveness depended on trust and competence rather than shared political affiliations. The missions Alina flew over the following months took her to regions of the planet where conventional military forces couldn't operate without triggering international incidents, using technology that rendered traditional concepts of sovereignty increasingly irrelevant. She found herself gathering intelligence about threats to global stability that required responses coordinated between nations that maintained public facades of competition and distrust. Alina's role in these international operations expanded as her expertise with exotic aircraft systems grew, eventually leading to assignments where she served as mission commander for teams whose members came from allied nations that couldn't publicly acknowledge their cooperation. The responsibilities of these positions required her to think about aerospace operations in terms of planetary security rather than national defense. The aircraft she commanded represented collaborative development efforts that embodied decades of international cooperation, resulting in capabilities that exceeded what any single nation could achieve independently. Alina was learning to operate systems that required coordination between multiple specialists from different countries, creating operational effectiveness that transcended traditional military structures. Her missions took on increasing complexity as global challenges evolved to require responses that pushed the boundaries of acknowledged international cooperation. Alina found herself leading operations that influenced international stability in ways that couldn't be attributed to any single nation, using aircraft that represented the cutting edge of human technological achievement. The psychological demands of operating at this level of international cooperation proved as challenging as the technical requirements of flying exotic aircraft. Alina was learning to function effectively in an environment where success depended on trust between individuals whose governments might be in conflict on other issues, requiring her to separate technical competence from political considerations. As Alina's experience with international operations grew, she began to understand that her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been part of a recruitment process that identified pilots capable of functioning effectively at the intersection of advanced technology and global security. Her journey from conventional military aviation had prepared her for responsibilities that extended far beyond individual aircraft operation. The scope of threats that justified maintaining such capabilities in secret became clear through missions that revealed challenges to planetary stability, requiring responses that transcended national boundaries. Alina was operating aircraft designed to address problems that could affect human civilization regardless of political divisions, using technology that represented collaborative achievements between nations that couldn't publicly acknowledge their cooperation. Her command responsibilities expanded to include training programs that prepared other pilots for integration into international operations, requiring Alina to develop expertise in managing teams whose members came from different military traditions and cultural backgrounds. The success of these training programs depended on her ability to identify individuals whose technical skills and psychological profiles enabled them to function effectively in multinational environments. Alina's reputation within the international aerospace community grew as her contributions to collaborative operations demonstrated the effectiveness of combining advanced technology with multinational cooperation. Her name began appearing in classified assessments that influenced planning for future programs requiring coordination between allied nations. The aircraft under Alina's command evolved to incorporate technological advances that represented cutting-edge collaboration between international aerospace engineers, resulting in capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in terms of surveillance, reconnaissance, and intelligence gathering. These systems required operational procedures that had been developed through careful coordination between allied military organizations. Alina's missions began to focus on challenges that threatened global stability in ways that required immediate response regardless of traditional diplomatic procedures. She was operating aircraft that could influence international events without leaving forensic evidence of any nation's involvement, providing capabilities that enabled allied governments to address threats while maintaining plausible deniability about their responses. The responsibility of commanding such capabilities required Alina to develop understanding of international relations that extended far beyond conventional military training. She was learning to consider the broader implications of aerospace operations on global stability, making decisions that could influence the course of international events for years to come. Her team members represented the finest pilots from allied nations, individuals who had been selected for their ability to function effectively in multinational environments while operating technology that officially didn't exist. Alina was learning to coordinate operations between specialists whose expertise complemented each other in ways that created capabilities exceeding what any individual nation could achieve. The missions under Alina's command began to achieve results that influenced international stability in ways that justified the enormous resources invested in developing exotic aircraft and training multinational teams. Her operations were gathering intelligence and conducting surveillance that provided allied governments with information necessary for maintaining global security. Alina's success in commanding international operations led to her promotion to positions of responsibility that placed her at the center of collaborative programs, representing the pinnacle of human aerospace achievement. Her encounter with the mystery aircraft had initiated a journey that culminated in responsibilities for capabilities that could influence the course of human civilization. Colonel Hendricks appeared at Alina's promotion ceremony with the satisfaction of someone whose long-term planning had produced desired results. Alina understood that her journey from conventional military aviation into the world of exotic aircraft and international cooperation had reached a milestone that would influence global security for decades to come. Your contributions to international aerospace cooperation have exceeded our most optimistic projections. Hendricks addressed Alina with respect that acknowledged her achievements in mastering capabilities that represented the cutting edge of human technology. Your command of multinational operations has demonstrated the effectiveness of collaborative approaches to global security challenges. Alina accepted her new rank with understanding that her responsibilities now extended to program development that would influence the course of international aerospace cooperation for generations. Her experience with exotic aircraft had qualified her to participate in planning future capabilities that would address challenges to global stability that hadn't yet emerged. The facilities under Alina's new command housed aircraft that represented collaborative development efforts involving allied nations that couldn't publicly acknowledge their cooperation. Her responsibilities included managing programs that pushed the boundaries of international technology sharing, while maintaining operational security necessary for capabilities that officially didn't exist. Alina's new position required her to coordinate with government officials whose authorities transcended traditional diplomatic channels, individuals who made decisions about international cooperation based on assessments of global security that couldn't be shared through conventional diplomatic procedures. She was operating at levels of classified cooperation that existed in the shadows of public international relations. The aircraft under Alina's command evolved to incorporate technological advances that represented decades of international collaboration, resulting in capabilities that could address challenges to global stability that required immediate response regardless of political considerations. These systems embodied the pinnacle of human aerospace engineering achievement. Alina's operations began to influence international events in ways that demonstrated the effectiveness of collaborative approaches to global security, using aircraft that could operate anywhere on the planet without detection by any existing defense system. Her missions were gathering intelligence and conducting surveillance that provided allied governments with capabilities that transcended traditional concepts of national power. The success of Alina's programs began to attract attention from international organizations that recognized the need for cooperative approaches to global challenges that exceeded the capabilities of any individual nation. Her achievements in commanding multinational aerospace operations demonstrated possibilities for international cooperation that extended far beyond traditional military alliances. Alina's reputation within the international security community grew as her contributions to collaborative operations influenced planning for future challenges that would require coordinated responses from allied nations. Her name appeared in classified strategic assessments that guided investment in aerospace technologies designed to address threats to global stability. As Alina's career reached new heights of responsibility and achievement, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from conventional military aviation into a world where technology and international cooperation merged to create capabilities that transcended traditional concepts of national power. Her encounter with the mystery aircraft had been the catalyst for a transformation that influenced not just her individual career, but the course of international aerospace cooperation. The aircraft under Alina's command represented the culmination of decades of collaborative development between allied nations, resulting in capabilities that could influence global stability in ways that justified the enormous investments in technology and training necessary for maintaining such exotic systems. Alina had become part of a story about human cooperation that existed at the very edge of technological possibility. Her final mission as an operational pilot took Alina over terrain that spanned continents, using aircraft that represented the pinnacle of international aerospace collaboration to address challenges that threatened global stability. The success of this mission would influence planning for future capabilities that would protect human civilization from threats that transcended national boundaries. As Alina completed her final operational flight, she understood that her career had contributed to capabilities that would influence international security for generations to come. Her encounter with the mystery aircraft had initiated a journey that culminated in achievements that represented the finest examples of human cooperation in addressing challenges that required collaborative responses from allied nations. The legacy of Alina's contributions to international aerospace operations would influence the development of future capabilities designed to protect global stability, using technology that represented collaborative achievements between nations that maintained public facades of competition, while working together to address challenges that threatened human civilization itself.